This is today's business leaders. Actionable advice from real-world professionals. And now here's your host, Gabe Arnold.
All right, I'm super excited. On the show today, I have Nathan Fraser, who, by his own words, is a professional copywriter, which I agree with, a podcast producer, which I agree with, and an amateur shit poster, which I also agree with that. And it's hands down the best, shortest, most concise bio I've ever gotten. So welcome to the show, Nathan.
Hey, thank you for having me on. I'm super excited to do this.
Awesome. Yeah. So we'll start out the same way that we start with everybody when they're on the first time. And I'll ask you this question, and then when you come back, we'll get into more trouble. But for today, when did you first realize that you were an entrepreneur?
Very early on, I was probably 15 years old, selling marijuana and realizing that I liked that a lot more than I liked going and working at the steam laundry.
And are you similar to me and you didn't finish high school? Because I didn't finish high school really officially.
I did not finish. I never did well in school. I dropped out actually in kindergarten. They forced me to go back the next year. I hated school. I always felt like school was more about training you how to be a round peg to fit in their round hole, and how to fit into society and how to respect authority. And I took what I could learn out of school, and I just couldn't stick it through the whole way. No.
Yeah. I love learning, and I've always loved learning, and I've always fucking hated school. Like, academia is not my thing.
Because school and learning aren't the same thing. Most of the people that I know, their education stops when they leave school, and I think that's part of the incorrect thinking about school. Is most self-learners, most people like me and you, we're learning till the day that we die. We're learning way past when most people quit. Most people, they go to school for 12 years, they go to college for 4 to 6 years, and they think that's the end of their education. And other people like us, we're like, oh, I got to get this new book. I got to take this new course. I got to try this new thing and see how it works out. And so there's a difference between school and education in my mind.
Yeah, that's a great point, because we're both essentially dropouts, and we read and learn probably faster than all of those people. So yeah, there's definitely something screwed up in that processor system.
Yeah, and I don't know how deep you want to go about it, but the education system, at least the one that we have in this country right now, it was based off of a Prussian education system. And in Prussia, this is before Germany, before it became Germany, they had a problem with people not being subservient to the King of Prussia, and they had a problem with overextending in war and their military not wanting to follow orders. And so they built their school system around creating obedient people that would end up being good citizens for the king. And Horace Mann, who is known as the godfather of the American education system, he actually went over there and modeled our school system off of theirs. And he said, hey, what they have for creating good citizens, we could use it for creating good factory workers. And so our entire school system is based off of bells tell you when you can get up and go to the bathroom. Bells tell you when you can. It's very Pavlovian. You show up at a specific time. You sit in a spot and you listen to the person teach you what to do. There's very little role reversal. There's very little being able to self-direct your education. And it was made to create good factory workers. And that's not the world we live in anymore. We don't live in the world where producing good factory workers is good for the country. Yeah, for the economy. And so I don't know how much longer that system's going to actually be relevant, because it's creating people that are not set up for what the opportunities are out there for us now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I always knew that it was invented for the Industrial Revolution, but I didn't know that it came from Prussia. That's super interesting. So
yeah,
but yeah, it's a failing system, which failed you and I apparently, or not. Maybe it motivated us. Uh, so at 15, you're an entrepreneur, and because school is not your jam, and to take us from there to today in less than 18 hours.
Okay, so I ran 3 or 4 businesses into the ground. Started a record label when I was 19. That was a lot of fun, but also a lifestyle that was just not congruent with where I wanted to go. But ran that business into the ground, started a t-shirt company, ran that business into the ground, started a software as a service company doing, it was like a graffiti cake print on type thing. It was a software where you could type in your name and create your own graffiti cakes. And that one was actually it was doing really, really well. We entered into negotiations with one of the world's largest retailers. And we put all of our eggs in that basket. And I had a software team that had worked on developing the software for a little bit over 2 years. We got it ready to go to market. We had it in a bunch of bakeries. It was one of the hottest sellers. And the linchpin of everything, the company that we put all our eggs in their basket, they decided they wanted exclusive rights, and it wasn't going to work for us. And so that fell apart, and all of a sudden we had a product and I had no idea how to sell it. I was 100% expecting them to take on all of the marketing and all of the selling. And when they said that they wouldn't take it unless they had exclusive rights to it, we found ourselves in a position where nobody on the team knew anything about marketing, knew anything about selling. And so we had a product and no way to sell it. And that was my third business that went under. And I realized that every single failure that I had experienced in my entrepreneurial life, all of them came back to the fact that I didn't know how to sell. So at that point, before I went back to my team and said, hey, I got another crazy idea for us to create, I had to learn how to sell. And so I learned how to sell. I learned how to market, and I learned how to copyright. And ever since then, it's been the exact opposite. So I'm a huge fan of, it doesn't matter what you sell. If you don't know how to sell it, you're not going to sell very much of it. So my biggest focus is learning how to sell things now.
Yeah, I can super relate. And I have failed at multiple business ideas over the years, so I can totally understand that part. And interestingly enough, there's an electronics chain that's still around today that beat the internet. They were before the internet and they're still around. And years ago, like 10 or 12 years ago, we were building this network area storage device, a piece of hardware, and we had it all figured out. We were using this what was back then newer technology called ZFS that Sun Microsystems had open sourced. We figured out the hardware. We had it all put together, and we went and sat down and pitched it to this huge retailer. That's all, I think they're like Midwest, Northeast part of the country, a pretty big company. We had it all figured out, and they're like, "Yeah, we're super interested, but you have to sell it for this price." And then the project died because I was like, well, no, I'm not gonna, I'll make like 4% a unit. Nope. Mm-hmm. It was so good. Reminds me of that experience where having one customer is a little risky, and letting one customer dictate the terms. It's a good way to go out of business.
Yeah. And if you don't know how to sell, then the buyer has all the leverage, and that's not a good position to be in at all.
Yeah. One of the things that I do a lot in the courses we have, and like when people come to me for one-on-one coaching, which I do a little bit of, is I basically force them to learn to sell before I let them build their products. And, it's like you should never, ever invest $1 of your own money in something until you have customer dollars to verify that it's actually a good idea. So, and it makes it a harder path, but it's the right path. And it's definitely really interesting to see people come back with, oh, well, I saw so-and-so guru say to do this first or do low. I'm like, you can do what you want, but if you can't sell it, like you're saying, then there's no point. It doesn't matter how great your technology is. It doesn't matter at all. So that's definitely a hard lesson you learned. And it's a good reminder.
Well, and something that's kind of related to that I've learned in writing sales copy is that as you learn how to write copy, you learn what is it that makes people buy? What is it that, and you start learning these lessons about, should I be even trying to sell something that people aren't wanting to buy? A lot of entrepreneurs, we've got this brilliant idea. Oh man, I came up with this new thing. Nobody's selling it. I can't believe nobody's selling it. I'm going to be the first person to market, and I'm going to get the first to market advantage, and I'm going to be rich because nobody's selling this. As a copywriter or as a marketer, the first question you ask is, why is nobody else selling this? And it's usually because it's not something that sells. But that's where being somebody who knows how to market, being somebody who knows how to sell, changes the way that you approach entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's for sure, because you dig into what you really have to learn in entrepreneurship is human psychology.
Mm-hmm.
If you understand that, you can choose the right ideas, you can write the right copy, you can sell the right thing. But yeah, I always tell people, when you start off, like you just said, with the, oh, I have this great idea, that's an ego-driven idea from inside of you in the negative way. There's certain things that should come in from inside of us, but that's an ego-driven idea. Odds of it succeeding are virtually impossible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas you go out and look for those trends, or like, what do people want, or what are they bitching about, or what are they buying anyway, but it really isn't a complete solution. That's the market, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so much easier to find out what people are already buying. And like you said, is there a tweak that I can make to make it even better and convince them to buy it from me? One of the things that whenever I take on a client for writing copy, one of the questions that I ask is, who else sells this? And what other solutions have people bought before they're buying yours? And what problems did they have with those other solutions? Why did those other solutions not work? And if somebody says, well, nobody else is selling anything similar to this, that's usually a point where I say, okay, well, I'm not going to write copy for you then.
Because they've done absolutely zero market research, or their product sucks.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. But if they say, hey, we've got this competition, and these three companies are all making a killing, and these are the solutions that people have already tried before they come to us, then I know, okay, there's a proven market for it. But yeah, it's one of those really hard, you said it goes back to the ego. It's one of those things where you have to say, hey, it's not about me. It's not about what I think is a brilliant idea. It's about what the general public thinks is a brilliant idea. And that's hard for people, especially to be an entrepreneur, you have to have confidence. You have to believe in yourself. You have to have a little bit of that ego. It's healthy, but
Right.
You also have to know how to keep it in check.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember I had created a system and kind of hacked how things worked with Craigslist years ago. I ended up doing about $1 million off of Craigslist in my early part of my career, and it was right around the time where Facebook came out, and I think there was one other big thing, but Facebook came out, and people would always come, oh, I'm going to build the next Facebook for this. And then, that was their idea. Like, oh, it's going to be the Facebook for this, or, it's going to be that, or it's going to be the Craigslist for this industry. Or the one that we heard more recently was, oh, it's the Uber of this. And what people don't understand is, like, those ideas are 1 in 100 million lucky shots in some senses. But because, like, how fast they blew up in the unicorn business that they are, that's the 1 in a million. Or 1 in 100 million or whatever idea. But those people just identified those gaps in the marketplace. Like you said, they said, people want this, we're seeing this trend, and at the right time, right place, they deliver the right solution. And it's not just like coming up with a brilliant idea, because we all have ideas. I have tons of dumb ideas.
Well, the other thing too is that people don't realize, the thing that those businesses have that they as an entrepreneur probably don't is a war chest of market research and development dollars, and they've got venture capitalists behind them, or they're a part of a bigger company that's got a huge war chest for creating new products. As an entrepreneur, we typically don't, unless we want to sell. Like you mentioned, Uber and Lyft is in the same position. Those businesses are basically kept alive by investors. They're kept alive by angel investors and venture capitalists. And So even then, you still have to know how to go out and sell, because you have to go sell it to the venture capitalists. And when you do it that way, you end up not even owning your own company. So
Yeah.
there's pluses and minuses. It's really easy to look at those examples and be like, oh, how awesome would it be to be the next Uber or the Uber for this industry? But it's not as clear cut or black and white as people think it is.
Yeah, and you're right. And it's the venture capital model, if I'm remembering the stats right, because I did some research on this a year or two ago, is like they're just betting on 1 in 10 working out. And they're dumping, say they dump like 10 million in each company. They put $100 million in, assuming that one will figure it out and make more than $100 million back for them. And it's that amount of leverage that you can have. In theory, you can have room to make mistakes. But what's interesting is if they would take the approach that you and I now take, which is learn the audience, figure it out, sell it right, test it small and scale it, then it takes more discipline and more hard work, way more mental effort, but you could hit more consistently or more successfully. I just yesterday pitched a funded 3-year-old company in the insurance space, because it's super easy for me to prospect on these guys because they do their marketing completely wrong because they're funded.
Yeah.
And so I sent them a mini little case study, like, hey, this isn't going to work. Like that was the essence of the message. And this happened. This is real common. They'll be like, oh no, we got it. We're running a bunch of tests right now. Like, and so I'll follow up in another 2 or 3 months and see how those tests works out. Cause I can tell that they hired people that have no clue how to market or sell. Like I'm sure you see those ads on Facebook all the time where they go to a confusing, homepage, or there's no call to action, or they're like, we're just branding. Like, no, you're not just branding. You're just being an idiot.
And that again comes down to, this is one of the things that frustrates me so much, is I learned everything I know about copywriting and marketing from direct response copywriters, and from talking with these people, from mentoring with these people, from reading their books, from going through their courses. And a lot of these businesses, especially the bigger businesses, they want a degree. They want to hire somebody who has an MBA in marketing, who went to college for it. And the professors that are teaching this stuff in college aren't real world direct response copywriters. They're teaching people, mass branding, mass marketing stuff. And that might, again, it goes back to, are you a company with $1 trillion war chest where you can afford to advertise on the Super Bowl for a commercial that people remember how witty the commercial was, but they have no idea what you were selling? Do you have that kind of money? Well, then fine, go ahead and invest in that type of advertising. But for the other 99% of business owners out there, they need to be working with people like me and you, because we're the ones that actually understand what works, because we learned it through the School of Hard Knocks, through putting our own money into things and figuring out what works, and learning about how direct response marketing works. And those are things that aren't taught in the college classes about how to market.
Yeah. And I don't know how we keep coming to education, but it's worth pointing out the problem with the college process is that it's an incestuous model. So the guy that's teaching you sales and marketing was taught sales and marketing from a professor that was taught sales and marketing from a professor that was taught from a professor most of the time. I'm not saying always, but like super common. So you got some bullshit that doesn't work. And it's not from guys like you and I, or like I mentioned before we got on, like Brian Kurtz is coming on the show next week, which I'm super excited about. Like he spent his own money. In the opening of his book that I'm reading, his new book, Over Deliver, he says, the reason I've been really successful in direct response marketing is because I paid for my own postage. Like, he's like, if it didn't work, it fucked me, not my client. He's like, I spent my own money on it. And it's, like, that's how you should learn things, like in the real world. Not theory is great, but it should always be, and I think this is in his book, or I read it somewhere else today. It should always be la, 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 la. It should always be learn, apply, learn, apply, learn, apply, learn, apply. And that's the only reason I know a couple things is because I've tried really fucking hard, and I read books all the time, and I try to watch for those incestuous systems, because they're all around us, where somebody's like, oh, you should do it this way on Facebook because we'll say like a Ty Lopez is doing it that way, or whoever. And whether or not that person is doing it right for their audience is one thing, and right or wrong. Like I don't know or enough of his stuff in detail, but I hear his name a lot, and there's like, oh, we're going to do it like him, or we're going to do it like Gary Vee, or we're going to do it like somebody else you follow. That's awesome, but you don't have that person's audience. So if you just copy it off of them and somebody else copies it off of them, and like it gets so far, it's so watered down that it's completely ineffective.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the other things too. One of the guys that I learned from very early on, took on as a mentor, is Ben Settle. And Ben taught me so much stuff about email. But one of the things that he taught me very early on was you can't just copy and paste what works for me, because it's not going to work for you. You can't just copy and paste what works for Guru X and expect to get the same results, because when people are buying from you, especially nowadays, they're buying from you. They're not buying, I mean, they're looking for the solution, they're looking for the transformation, but they want it specifically, especially nowadays. We've got social media, we've got, you know, smaller businesses, personal brand-based businesses. If people are buying from you, it's not specifically because you're the only one offering what they want. It's because they like you. And if you're just copy and pasting what somebody else is doing and trying to build a brand that way, it's not going to work. And a lot of people are afraid to be themselves, and that's definitely not something you can accuse me of being guilty of. But a lot of people are afraid of letting their true personality come through. And so they want to do that. I'm just going to copy and paste what Ty Lopez does, or I'm just going to copy and paste what Gary Vee does, or I'm going to download this cheat sheet and copy and paste status updates. And it just doesn't work. And I rant about it, but man, it's one of the things that plagues, as a marketer, it's one of the things that I see plaguing so many businesses out there.
Yeah. And then it becomes tactical, and like tactics get worn out super fast instead of it being an authentic message. Like one of the reasons that I started following you and connecting is, you know, some buzz about all your shit posting, but more importantly, is you wrote some long post about some lesson you learned while you were dealing drugs. And it was you. Like it was you talking, like, and it was like, oh my God, that was a really good lesson. And like, you sucked me in line by line by line by line. Like it was a really, really strong piece of copy for Free Market Squad. And it was just brilliant, and it was authentically you. And then all the way through, like, it was your personality. And it's not that there's not other, like you said, it's not that there's not other people out there that can teach copywriting or can give you these really high value interviews, or but it's because it's like we connect at a personal level. And a friend of mine, who I think you guys are connected to, I don't remember, but Marissa Calley, she put out a kind of like, here's what to expect in 2019 on social media this year. And one of the things that really stood out to me in her report was, she's like, it's the year of the resurgence of like micro influencers, or that's where you're going to get your impact now, because we all do now have the ability to have, you know, a few thousand followers. And if we do it right, that can fuel business. It can fuel referrals. It can build the business. And you don't have to have millions of followers to have a really lucrative business if you know how to talk to them and really be yourself. And that's what I really appreciate about how you write and how you act online.
Yeah. And the thing is, I understand I push a lot of people away. There's a lot of people that they friend request me, and then 3 days later they delete me as a friend. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But I do get a lot of people that buy into one of my higher tier courses, or that people that end up hiring me to write copy for them. And the thing they say is exactly what you said. Oh, that post that you said about selling drugs and the lesson that you learned, or that post that you wrote about peeing your pants in the first grade.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for somebody. I wasn't going to go with you, but because that resonated with me so much, you're the only guy that I can imagine going with for this particular project. And in order to get that, in order to get people that are like, I have the money to spend, there's 15 other people, you're the only person I can imagine handing this money over to, you have to risk turning away a segment of the market. It's that old thing. You can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. It's a
Yeah.
really important thing to know about your marketing. There's some people that you're a good fit for, and there's some people that you're not a good fit for. And if you play it safe and you're never willing to expose or put stuff out there that might be slightly divisive, you're never going to end up getting the people that you're a good fit for. They're never going to realize how good of a fit for you they are.
Yeah. I'm reading this interesting book called The Courage to be Disliked. And it's about Adlerian psychology. A friend of mine recommended it to me. And in the book, it's this dialogue between this old philosopher and this young kid who's going to prove the old guy right, wrong, of course. Not that I've ever tried to do that as a young kid, but there's an interesting section in there where the old man says he's like, if you try to, please everybody, then you'll be at their whim and you'll be under their control and you'll end up miserable and unhappy. And he's like, that's going to be a failure of a life. He said, you have to have the courage to be disliked. He's like, you shouldn't go out there trying to make people hate you. That's not what he's saying, but you have to be willing to have some people not like you in order to really find your own level of contribution in society, really like find the work that makes you happy. And I don't think that people truly understand that concept. And then, like you said, they play it safe. And because of that, they have to take on clients. Any client that comes, they have to take them because they're broke. And then they deal with some clients they like, hopefully, and a bunch of assholes who don't really know who they are. And then it just becomes this horrible cycle. I've been in it. It was a really big deal. Like over the last few years, I had, figured out client selection a little bit better. But I had one that just was hanging on for dear life that I finally fired like 2 months ago. It was the greatest day of my life. I'm significantly happier. And they were the last bad client because I dumped so many, but like contractually there was some stuff and like I didn't want to create a lawsuit and there's some things I was wound up in and it was a big project. But like the day I let them go was the best day of my life. And really diving into more of who you are and just putting it out there. Like you said, you're going to piss off some people and that's good. You would really be risking your own sanity if you worked with everybody or thought you had to attract everybody. Right.
Mm-hmm. And something not specifically marketing related, but just a life lesson in general is a lot of people, they do that. They live their whole lives to make their parents happy, to make their significant other happy, to do what they think their friends want them to do. I know so many people that, and this has been kind of a constant theme because I've never been able to do that. It's just not something that is in me, but over and over again, I've had people tell me, I wish I could live life as courageously as you do. You just live life. You're just like a bull and you just charge forward through life. And I wish that I could live life that way. And I know so many people that are like, I wish I could have started my own business. I wish that I had the courage, but instead my mom wanted me to go to school to become a lawyer, or my dad wanted me to go to school to become a doctor. And they're miserable. They're successful. They make money. They have a good, they've got a nice house and they've got 3 cars and they've got a family and they're happy, but they're miserable in the fact that they're living for other people. They're not living their own life. And it can work, like you said. You can do the same thing in your own business where you take on clients you're not happy with, or you do work that you're not happy with. But hey, you only live one time. At least I can only remember living one time, and I want to make sure that as long as I'm not hurting other people, I want to make sure that I'm living my life and not living the life that other people expect me to live.
Yeah. That's where we're totally the same, because it's like I've never done anything that's supposed to be that way or to be popular. I mean, I have done a lot of things in my life that people have said, you're really fucking it up. And I'm like, well, this is the path I'm going to go. And I'm willing to pay the consequences too if I am wrong. And I've been wrong plenty of times. But then for the times I've been right, I'm really happy with it. And I don't need people to give me approval for, I don't need to feel that approval. In some senses, years ago, it was almost like I got a huge rise out of getting people to not like what I was doing, which is not, you shouldn't do it for that reason either, I don't think. But yeah, you're right. It's like, it is, being courageous and figuring it out. And I was talking to Katie yesterday, and she said, I didn't know this. She said that your personality is formed in the first 3 years of your life, which is, it was really interesting. And I'm curious because that got me thinking yesterday, and I'll ask you a question, which I don't have to figure out. I don't know if you will. Is like, why do you think you are that way? Because obviously it's from early on. You said in kindergarten you tried to drop out of school.
I did drop in kindergarten. I stopped going to school. It wasn't for me. And so instead of going to school, my mom would pack my lunch and give me a backpack and send me off to school. And I'd make it about halfway to school, and then I'd go and I'd play at the playground. There was a park that was about in between halfway to school, or I just wander around the different neighborhoods and see what I could explore. And then the school ended up calling her and was like, "Hey, is everything okay with Nathan?" And she's like, "What are you talking about? Well, he hasn't been here in 3 weeks." I came home that day and she's freaking out on me. She's like, "Where have you been?" I was like, "I was at school." And she's like, "I know you weren't at school." So I had to fess up. They started sending a truant officer to pick me up and take me to school every day. And then I would just, as soon as first recess would hit, as soon as the bell hit, I'd take off. And so they said, "Nathan's just not ready for school yet." And they made me go back the next year. But yeah, I'm not sure.
What makes us that way is like, I don't know. Like I didn't realize it happened that early, but it totally did. Now that she said that and I thought more about it, like I've been a troublemaker in that sense since a young age. What makes us that way?
I don't know. I think, I can barely remember most of the stuff that happened when I was 3 years old, so I'm not exactly sure. I know that my dad, though,
Not far back either.
yeah, I know my dad was always, he was very cantankerous. He was always anti-authoritarian. He always taught me to stand up for myself. And I think that probably just a lot of kids don't have that. They're not taught to stand up for themselves. They're not taught to have courage. They're not taught to have confidence. And I mean, we go through 12 years of being told, sit down and shut up and listen to the authority figure. Most of our parents, they say, you say, "Well, why do we have to do this?" "Because I said so, because I'm the boss." And so you get that beat into your head enough over and over and over again. Eventually it sticks. And I think that my dad always taught me, stand up to bullies. He always taught me, if somebody steps on your toes, you break their ankles. He always taught me that, you got to live your life for you. You don't just blindly listen to what authority figures say. And so I think probably he was the biggest influence on me being that way. And I'm thankful. My dad screwed up a lot in life, but I'm thankful that he passed that lesson on to me.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it's a good point because my grandfather raised me from like 7 or 8 years old, and he's an entrepreneur and he thought everything was possible. So it wasn't like, he's like, "Oh yeah, no, we can do that." Like people would tell him it's impossible. He's like, "No, I'll show you how." Like, so yeah, you're probably right. It probably is like modeling confidence. And that definitely makes sense because when I'm coaching people or they're coming through a course or something, like the biggest hurdle is to give them confidence to send that email or pick up the phone or call somebody or sit down and interview a prospect and say, "What do you really want?" Like they're scared shitless to do that most of the time. Mm-hmm.
What comes to mind is that picture of the horse that's tied to a plastic lawn chair and it's just stuck there. It's a 2-pound plastic lawn chair and the horse won't move because it sees that it's tied to it. And they've done experiments with certain types of fish, a fish that will jump out of the water, or fish. They've had fish where they'll put 2 fish in the same aquarium, where one fish is a natural predator to the other fish, and they'll put a glass divider between the two, and the fish that's the predator will run into the glass divider 3 or 4 times trying to get those fish, and eventually realize that there's a glass divider there. And when they take the glass divider out, they just won't go after those fish because they think that the glass divider is still there. And a lot of us, that's the way it's just beat into us over and over again. There's 2 sets of rules. There's the rules for people that are special and they're allowed to do these things in life. And then there's the rules for the rest of us. And we have to live this type of life. And you get to 12th grade, or sometimes you get to 2nd grade, and some people are just so convinced that that's the way some people are able to start businesses. Some people are the boss. Some people are able to live the life that they want. And the rest of us it's just not part of what we're cut out for. And by second grade, by third grade, by 12th grade, by the end of college, they've just been hammered with that lesson so many times that when they get out into the real world and the glass divider is not there anymore, they've just been so trained to stay on their side of the fish tank that they just live their entire lives there. And it's very hard to overcome. It's a mental imprisonment that most people just are never able to break free of.
Yeah, that's very clearly described. And like, that's crazy. It must be hard to live that way.
Yeah, I feel bad for people that live that way. And even in my own life, I can say that there's certain aspects where
Right. We
I
all
know
have something.
I have those thoughts too. So I can relate to it, but yeah, man, 99% of the world, that's the way that they live. And I do feel bad for them.
Yeah, that's crazy. I had Adam Allison I had on the show probably a year or so ago. He dropped out of high school, and he is the one that built the first NBA website, and ended up doing websites for the entire NBA when the internet kind of came online. And like,
Nice.
he's a dropout, It's like he just couldn't conform. He just couldn't figure it out, because the few years that he did go to high school, he would just sit in the cafeteria all day and hang out with his friends and never went to school, like actual class. And there's such a pattern of people I talk to that have been willing to step out and try to start their business or try to do something, that they just can't conform. And I think that's definitely a good lesson for people, no matter where you fall on the spectrum, if you're great at school or whatever, is that if you're going to find success, my grandfather always used to say, he's like, he said, you'll never get any rewards if you don't risk something. And he said it better than that, but that was kind of the messaging of, like, if you're not willing to risk something or try something new or fail, then there's no chance that you can actually succeed or win at anything. And that's wherever you've been or whatever you've been conditioned to do, just like Nathan said, I have the same things. There's certain things I've been super conditioned, and so I'm a total scaredy cat about it, to be honest. And then I have to go figure out how to learn that skill. But if you're not willing to be brave or take that step of faith or have some courage or whatever you want to call it, then there's no way you can grow or change. There's no way you can step to the next level, because it's scary. Like we were talking before we got on, I just sent an email to Brian Kurtz, and he's one of my heroes who taught me how to write. And, the worst case is he wouldn't get it, or he wouldn't respond, or he'd say no. But he said yes. And he's like, yeah, I'd love to come on the show. And I find that people just don't ask because they're too scared. And if I could just flip that switch in people's brains, I would totally do it for them, because they'd have a better life.
Yeah. And I think that, kind of to tie this back into what we started the conversation with, a lot of people think that their education stops at the walls of the school, of the institution. And right now we have so much opportunity. We can take online courses. We can connect on Facebook Zoom calls. We can learn from so many different places. I mean, there's audiobooks, there's courses, there's websites where you can just go and read. There's online libraries where you can just get the world's knowledge is accessible to you now. But so many people have been trained to think that education is something that happens inside of the school, and they're not willing to reach out. They're not willing to do those things. It's because it's that glass barrier that's in the aquarium. Brian Kurtz would never take the time to deal with me, or maybe they have. Maybe they've bumped into it. I sent out an email to this guy trying to get him on my podcast. He never responded. I sent out an email to this girl trying to get her on my podcast. She never responded. I really want to get this other person, but am I just going to run into that glass wall again?
Yeah.
And they get stuck in that mindset, and it's so much the mindset, man. I was talking about this earlier with one of my clients, is that for long times throughout history, oppressive, authoritarian dictators have had to use brute force to keep their people in line. And we're at a point now where the most oppression happens inside of our own minds. We're the people that keep ourselves in line nowadays. And maybe it's because we've been trained to do so. Maybe it's because it's just part of who we are. But man, to be able to break free of that, to be able to go out and be your own boss, to be able to not be afraid of smacking into that glass wall, It's so empowering. But yes, the most bondage that happens nowadays is mentally.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's exactly where all that work has to start. Because if you've already pre-decided that they're not going to respond or it's not going to work, then of course you wouldn't try. Um, it's really interesting to me. I've been doing a ton of work on this in the last year or so now. It's really interesting to me the level at which our mind controls our life and the outcomes and everything. Like I just am working on learning this new technique where you can fall asleep in 120 seconds, and it essentially, I'll send it over to you if you're interested. It essentially teaches you how to shut down from top of your head to to your toes. Just shut everything down and tell your body it's time to fall asleep. Like that's the basics of it. Like there's a little strategy, there's a little process to it, but it works. Like I've done it 2 nights in a row and I've fallen asleep in like 10 minutes or less, which is faster than I've fallen asleep in years.
No kidding.
And it all comes down to me getting my mind to tell my body to do what it's supposed to do. And it's like, it sounds simple, but we don't explore the potential power of our minds enough. So of course we don't try something in business, or we don't ask that girl out, or we don't go send that. Like we've already preset the frame in our head, and then we don't do anything. And it's like, it's a simple concept, but it's super powerful if you just continually work on it, because our minds are expansive tools. I mean, they're just powerful, expansive, worlds almost. So, but yeah, so let's transition a little bit. I have a couple questions about your writing, and then I know you have a new book out that we want to talk about, and anything else you want to share that you think would be valuable here to the audience. But one thing I admire about you that I'm legitimately curious about for myself is that you're obviously a great writer and a great marketer, and you understand how to sell, and you do that for your clients and have had huge success. And you mentioned like one of your launches ended up, doing $250,000. I mean, that's pretty significant copy results. And, but what I like about what you do is you actually continually apply your skill set to your own business, and you do your own marketing well. And personally, that's always been a challenge for me, because like I can go write a great sales letter or do a campaign or like get great results for my clients. And then when I turn around and look at my own business, it's harder. So what's the secret there? Because you make it look effortless. I'm sure it's not, but like you figured out how to, put shoes on the cobbler's, kids too, so to speak. Like, so how does that work?
Really what it comes down to is something that I learned from Ben Settle very early on. I like working with clients. I get good paydays from clients. To be honest, though, I only take on a new copywriting client once a month, maybe once every other month.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll go 3 or 4 months without taking on a new client. And the reason why is because I prefer to sell my own stuff, and I prefer to have my own business. I prefer to make all of the money that comes in from my sales copy. I prefer maybe I'm just a greedy bastard like that, but I prefer it that way. I prefer to be in charge. So I have two different businesses that I do the marketing for, and all of the profits from one of them go directly to me. And then one of them I'm a third owner in, so a third of the profit goes to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it really, I mean, it is something that I think a lot of people have, especially in our niche, we have trouble with. We're great at getting results for other people. We're not so great at getting those same results for ourselves. I think the only reason that I am able to do it is because I decided to focus on it. I've put so much focus more on my own stuff than client stuff over the last, I don't know. I was doing a lot of client work for up until about 2 years ago. And then about 2 years ago, I decided, I want to have my own business. I want to have my own things that I'm trying to sell. So I have a software as a service that I sell, and then I have a book that I sell, and I have a community that I sell people into. And being able to sell my own stuff and have that balance, because those things, the book is recurring income. The software as a service is a continuity program. The community is a continuity program. So I can make money selling other people's stuff, but I also like to make money selling my own stuff. I don't know if that even answers the question, other than the fact that Ben Settle told me, hey, you need to, if you're a good copywriter, you need to have something of your own that you're selling, and you need to sell the shit out of that. And so I consciously made a decision to learn how to do that. And up until that point, I had no idea. I was 100% based off of referrals, and it was always sink or swim. It was always famine or feast. And thankfully, I've gotten to the point where it's not like that anymore. But it's the roller coaster of entrepreneurialism. It could be like that again.
Yeah. No, I think that is a good answer. You said a couple of key things. You said, I chose to focus in on my own stuff. And I think that's hard because that's a great example. I don't know what it was like in the moment when you chose to do that. Fortunately, you have a great mentor that pointed the way, which is always good to get mentorship and coaching and help. Obviously, that's a huge part of this. And then on top of it, you had to have the courage to say, if I do bet on myself and just focus my time and energy on my own things, it could work out. It comes back to that courage level. And I think that's probably a piece of it when we see people, or in our own businesses, like in a certain area, or maybe even across the board, we don't do as well for ourselves as we do for others. Maybe we're not betting on ourselves enough. Maybe we're not being courageous enough.
I think the other thing too is, and you probably already know this because you're a marketer, it's a lot easier to see the full picture when you're not stuck inside of the frame.
Yes,
so when somebody hires me, and they say, hey, here's how we're marketing, here's our landing page, here's our emails, figure out what's going wrong, I can look at it and I'm like, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. This is really good. Definitely keep doing this. I bet you're getting really good results with this. I bet you this is just not connecting, and let's figure out a plan to fix all this. And they're like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Why weren't we able to see that? Because you're stuck inside the frame. Yeah. When it comes to yourself, you deal with the same thing. I deal with the same thing. So I have, fortunately, I have a lot of people that I can go to. I can go to David Garfinkel. I can hit up Ben Settle. I can hit up Landon Porter, and I can be like, hey, will you take a look at this? Because I'm feeling like there's something I'm not seeing.
Yeah.
And they usually be like, oh yeah, this, and this. You're screwing up right there. I'm like, God, why did I not? That's exactly what I would have told one of my clients, but when it was me trying to sell my own thing, it was a blind spot. I couldn't even see it. So having mentors, having people that you can go to, having a mastermind group, I'd say a mastermind group is probably one of the most important things, is having a strong mastermind group of other people who you can say, hey, I'm dealing with this. I can't figure out why this email sequence isn't converting, or I can't figure out why this offer is not working, or I have this great idea, but I'm not sure. What do you guys think? Having people that have your best interests at heart that you can go to, that aren't stuck inside of the picture like you are, is probably one of the biggest things that makes a difference on being able to actually be successful selling yourself.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right about that too. And I wish there was a way out of getting outside of our own frame, but I have yet to figure that out. And you're right. It's like, I can go in and see, oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. And then I hire some coaches or people, or even comparably, I could hire a junior copywriter that hasn't written that much, and they could still point out to me what I did wrong, because I'm just this close to it. So yeah, you should really, I appreciate how you continually improve your own stuff and put it out there and do really well with it, because it's really inspiring, and it helps me think about, okay, how can I level up my own stuff? Because it's easy to crush it for clients compared to figuring out your own stuff sometimes. And it's nice to see. It's nice to see you doing it. So I appreciate that, man.
I appreciate it too. Thank you.
Cool. So tell us about the new book and anything else that you think people that want to actually learn how to sell and market the right way should be a part of that you have.
Yeah. So one of the shifts that I've seen happening when I first started doing copy, a lot of it was for radio 30-second or 45-second spots on the radio. I did a lot of pamphlets, a lot of written stuff, sales letters, direct response sales letters. That was really popular when I first got into copywriting. That was what people were wanting. Now, over the last 2 to 3 years, I've seen a big shift where people are hiring me to write sales pages, landing pages, and video sales letters are the biggest 3 things that I have people, and email, but I'm trying to move away from doing email for people. But sales pages is like one of the biggest things that if you've got good traffic and you know who your traffic is, sales pages can just, I mean, that's the final piece. That's where the decision is actually made. So a lot of my clients, that's what I've been focusing on for them lately. And so I got it actually right here. I wrote a small book. It's you can see it. It's like 50 pages long. It's not a very big book, but it basically walks through the 12-step method that I use for writing sales pages. And it's all of the stuff that, you know, Eugene Schwartz and all of the like classic copywriters out there. It's what they used, but it's interpreted into today's modern selling, which happens mostly on the internet. So it walks you through how to write a really good, high converting sales page. It's my own template. It's a formula that I've kind of Frankensteined together from things that I learned from other people. And it's pretty much every time that I write a sales page for somebody, it's the template that I use. And so I just kind of walk through, and it's very psychology based. I try to each section that I go through, I walk you through, here's how you write a headline. Here's how you write a hook. Here's how you transition into an offer. Here's how you want to write your bullets. And each section, before I get into how to do it, I go through the psychology with some examples or stories of why people's brains work the way that they do and how you can use this to your, I mean, some of it's kind of dark arts stuff, but I mean, when you're a marketer, you have to accept that we have to work with the way people are, not the way that we wish people were.
Exactly.
And so yeah, so it's my process from A to Z, how I write sales pages. Some of the clients that I've written, last year, one of my clients that I used did a $250,000 launch off of this sales page process. And I've been getting feedback and testimonials. Yesterday, one of my Facebook friends, and I made sure that it was okay that I mentioned her on this, but let me just pull this up real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see here. Yesterday, I just got feedback from Juliet Stapleton. She does she has a boot camp that she does. She said she used the book to rewrite her sales page, and she's already seeing more sales. She just bought the book like a week ago, and she rewrote her sales page, and she's already seeing more sales from it. So it's a rock solid template that I use almost every time that I write a sales page, and people that have been buying it have been getting similar results. And so just to plug it real quick, again, it's called the How to Write This Perfect Sales Page, even if you're not a copywriter, and you can check that out. You can get your own copy by going to salespagebook.com.
Awesome. Very cool, man. That's exciting. I'm going to grab a copy because when you booked, I don't know if it was out or not. We were talking about that, our schedule about, but I'm going to grab a copy of that. And I personally really like the short, actionable books like that. Todd Brown put out a book that's like this long, and it was one of the most useful things I read because there's no fluff. It's like, here's what you do, here's the process. And I think those are really valuable tools. And I actually think that that's where the book market is going in a lot of senses. Not that I don't like the really in-depth, like learn everything, historic, all the background stuff. I like that. But it's really, really cool to have short, actionable how-to guides. Those are super useful. So definitely encourage everybody to check that out. And you can learn more about Nathan at copyandfunnels.com. He is, like I said, one of my favorite copywriters that I follow, and just a super smart guy and knows a lot about a lot of things. And that's another little secret. If you want to be a great copywriter, learn about everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's so many lessons outside. One of the things, just a real quick side tangent, one of the things that I try to do or try to recommend is don't just absorb business. Don't just absorb marketing. I read a lot of fiction books. I read a lot of history books. I dive deep into psychology. I'm a freaking obsessed nut about the way the human mind works.
Yeah.
And you'll find lessons that you can tie into your marketing from all of those other things. Read a good fiction book. Why is this fiction book good? Why is it that I can't put this book down? What is it that makes me turn from page to page to page? How can I use that in my sales letters so that people can't put my sales letter down? there's lessons everywhere. You don't have to just focus only on I've got to buy the newest business book that come out every month. Take a break and enjoy life and absorb the lessons that are all around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's where your strongest copy comes from. Not the business lessons, not the boring stuff. It's the when I peed my pants stories that convert.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Nathan. We'll definitely have you back on and keep having these enjoyable and really valuable conversations. I super appreciate the time, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it as well.
You've been listening to Today's Business Leaders with Gabe Arnold. Remember to subscribe on iTunes. For more information, visit todaysbusinessleaders.com.